At 56, Phil Mickelson has been exposed after Rory McIlroy dropped a bombshell accusation live on camera. This isn't just another golf feud. It is the moment the sport's biggest defector finally got called out by the man who never stopped fighting for the tour. Rory publicly accused Phil of blowing up professional golf, and the timing couldn't be worse for lefty. And honestly, the sheer audacity makes my blood boil. Regular golf fans are struggling to afford tee times at their local munis, yet these country club elites are busy tearing the sport apart because they didn't get their way. Phil Mickelson, a man worth hundreds of millions, decided instead of having a conversation with the tour, he would lead an exodus that fractured professional golf forever. It is a selfish act, proving these spoiled athletes care about nothing but their own egos and bank accounts. But look past the outrage. Phil Mickelson isn't just a greedy defector, he is the architect of the biggest power shift in golf history. He realized the PGA Tour's structure was a trap designed to shift all the leverage away from the players and onto the suits in Ponte Vedra. Let me show you how this all unfolded, why Rory chose this exact moment to speak, and what Phil's exposure really means for the future of the sport. Personally, I think Rory just drew a line in the sand. Do you agree? Or do you think Phil was justified? Drop it below. And if real golf analysis without the fluff is what you're here for, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. It happened on a Wednesday, August 19th, 2026. The BMW Championship, one of the biggest events on the PGA Tour calendar. Reporters were gathered around Rory McIlroy ahead of the tournament. The questions started coming. Most of them were about LIV Golf, about its future, about whether it was collapsing. And then, someone asked Rory about the players who left for LIV, about Phil Mickelson specifically. What happened next sent shockwaves through the entire golf world. Rory didn't hesitate. He looked directly at the cameras and said this: Phil was unhappy with some stuff or whatever it was. Like, surely that just warranted a conversation, instead of blowing the entire professional game up and doing something else. Let that sink in. Blowing the entire professional game up. That is the accusation. Rory McIlroy, four-time major champion, the most vocal critic of LIV Golf since 2022, just publicly blamed Phil Mickelson for the fracture that has torn golf apart. And he didn't stop there. He added, "I'm pretty sure if the PGA Tour were handed $6 billion, it would have done a better job with it." A direct shot at LIV's financial management. A direct shot at Phil, and it was all caught on camera. Every word, every pause, every moment of tension. The reporters leaned in. The golf world started buzzing within minutes. This wasn't just a passing comment. This was a full-blown accusation. Rory called out Phil by name. He didn't dance around it. He didn't soften the blow. He said what he had been holding in for years. But here is the question nobody has answered yet. Why did Rory choose this exact moment to finally say it out loud? The answer to that question will tell you everything about the crisis that is consuming golf right now. And it starts with what was happening inside LIV Golf at the exact same time Rory was speaking. To understand why Rory spoke when he did, you have to understand what was happening to LIV Golf in the summer of 2026. The Saudi Public Investment Fund, the people who had been bankrolling the entire LIV operation, cut the league's funding midway through the 2026 season. The money tap was turned off, just like that. Hundreds of millions of dollars that had been flowing into the league suddenly stopped. The consequences were immediate. LIV scrapped its Michigan team finale. Employees were warned about potential layoffs. The league that had promised to revolutionize professional golf was suddenly fighting for survival. The final LIV tournament of the 2026 season began on August 20th at the club at Chatham Hills in Westfield, Indiana. That was the very next day after Rory's comments. Then came the scramble. LIV officials started frantically looking for new investors. They found someone, a mystery investor, but the amount and identity remained completely undisclosed. The league announced it would scale back from 14 tournaments to just 10 next year. That is a 30% reduction. And the players? The players who had left the PGA Tour for guaranteed money and shorter schedules? They were watching their golden goose get cooked. One of the most telling moments came at the 2026 Masters. Sergio Garcia was involved in an incident that may have triggered the funding cut. The Saudis were reportedly unhappy with how some players were representing the league. That unhappiness turned into action. The money stopped flowing. And now, LIV is reportedly seeking between $250 and $350 million in fresh capital just to survive. That is not expansion money. That is life support money. So when Rory looked into those cameras on August 19th and said Phil blew up professional golf, he was speaking at the exact moment the evidence was staring everyone in the face. LIV was collapsing. The Saudi experiment was failing. And the man who started it all, Phil Mickelson, was nowhere to be found. But the real question is, who started this fire in the first place? And what was Phil actually doing while his league was burning down? Let's go back to the beginning. Phil Mickelson is a 6-time major champion, 3 Masters titles, a PGA Championship, an Open Championship. He has won everything the game has to offer. He was the people's champion, the left-handed magician who could pull off shots nobody else could even imagine. At age 50, he won the 2021 PGA Championship, becoming the oldest major winner in history. It was one of the greatest moments in golf. A legend defying age, defying expectations, proving that greatness doesn't have an expiration date. But something changed. Phil started talking about how unhappy he was with the PGA Tour, about how the players weren't getting enough, about how the system was broken. And then, in 2022, he did something that shocked the entire golf world. He joined LIV Golf. Reports suggested Phil was paid somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 million to sign with the Saudi-backed league. But Rory's accusation goes deeper than that. He is not saying Phil joined LIV for the money. He is saying Phil joined LIV because he didn't want to have a conversation. Because instead of sitting down with the PGA Tour and saying, "Here is what I think needs to change," Phil decided to burn the whole thing down and start over. That is the exposed part of the title. Rory is exposing Phil's motivation. He is saying, this was not about principle. This was about one man's ego. One man who was willing to fracture the sport he had spent a lifetime building because he didn't get his way. And the thing is, Phil's current situation makes Rory's accusation even more damaging. Because Phil isn't just being exposed professionally, he is being exposed personally too. In June 2026, just 2 months before Rory's comments, Phil Mickelson's membership at the Farms Golf Club in Rancho Santa Fe, California, was revoked. The club issued a statement saying, following a staff member report of member misconduct, the club provided immediate and ongoing support to the staff member. Then came the Scratch investigation. On June 28, 2026, golf outlet Scratch published an investigation by journalist Alan Shipnuck alleging multiple instances of sexual misconduct against Phil Mickelson. Multiple women came forward with stories about Phil's behavior, stories that painted a picture of a man who felt entitled to do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, with whomever he wanted. Phil denied everything. He called the Scratch article an anonymously sourced drive-by shooting, but the damage was done. His reputation, already tarnished by the LIV defection, was now being dragged through the mud for something far more serious. And then, in July 2026, Phil stepped away from the sport. He announced he was dealing with a family health matter. Whether that is true or a convenient way to avoid the media storm, nobody knows. But the result is the same. Phil Mickelson, one of the greatest golfers of all time, is absent from the game at the exact moment his legacy is being dismantled. So when Rory said Phil blew up professional golf, he wasn't just talking about LIV. He was talking about everything. The defection, the chaos, the personal scandals, the complete and total implosion of a once great reputation. But Phil wasn't the only one who walked away. And some of those other names are about to pay the price for following him. Let's talk about Bryson DeChambeau. Bryson is a 2-time major winner. He won the 2020 US Open. He won the 2025 Masters. He is one of the most recognizable figures in golf. The mad scientist. The guy who bulked up to hit the ball 400 yards. He joined LIV in 2022 alongside Phil, and at the time, it seemed like a smart move. Bryson was getting paid. He was playing less. He was still competing at a high level, but now his future is uncertain. LIV's funding is cut, the league is shrinking, and Bryson is caught in the middle. He has made comments recently about hoping LIV is given one more shot. That is not the language of someone who is confident about the future. That is the language of someone who is worried. If LIV collapses, where does Bryson go? Back to the PGA Tour? That is not guaranteed. To another league? There isn't one. Bryson's options are limited, and he knows it. He bet on LIV, and right now, that bet is looking like a losing one. But if Bryson's future is uncertain, Jon Rahm's might already be decided. Jon Rahm is a different story entirely. Rahm is a two-time major winner, a former world number one. He was LIV's biggest signing, the guy who proved that even the most loyal PGA Tour players could be swayed by enough money. When Rahm signed with LIV in late 2023, it was a seismic event. But now, according to multiple reports, LIV officials are resigned to losing him after the 2026 season. The league's biggest star, the one who was supposed to be the face of the new era, and they are already planning for his departure. Rahm is reportedly still owed around $150 million by LIV. If LIV cannot pay, Rahm has every incentive to leave, and if Rahm leaves, other players will follow. Think about the message that sends. If Jon Rahm, the guy who said he was loyal to the PGA Tour before taking the Saudi money, is walking away, what does that say about the league's future? It says that even the biggest stars don't believe in it anymore. Rahm's departure would be a massive blow to LIV. It would validate everything Rory has been saying. LIV was never sustainable. It was a bubble built on Saudi money, and now that the money is drying up, the bubble is bursting. But the most damaging allegation against Phil didn't come from a golfer. It came from someone's ex-wife. Ashley Perez is the ex-wife of Pat Perez, a former PGA Tour pro who also joined LIV. In June 2026, Ashley Perez came forward with a disturbing story. She claimed that in 2015, 7 years before the LIV exodus, Phil Mickelson showed her a nude photo of himself with an erect penis. Let me repeat that. In 2015. Before any of this LIV stuff happened, before the Saudi money, before the defections, before the lawsuits, Phil Mickelson was allegedly sending explicit images to another man's wife. Ashley Perez told her story to Scratch as part of their investigation. She said Phil showed her the photo during a conversation. She said she was shocked and disgusted, and her story was backed up by other women who came forward with similar allegations. Phil denied everything. He called the investigation an anonymously sourced drive-by shooting. He said he was being targeted because of his involvement with LIV. He tried to make it about the money, about the politics, about anything other than the behavior itself. But the damage was done. The exposure was complete. Phil Mickelson was no longer just the guy who blew up professional golf. He was the guy who had been hiding a pattern of behavior that was now being exposed for the world to see. But to understand how we got here, how two men who were once friends became bitter enemies, you have to go back to the beginning. It started around 2010. Rory McIlroy was a young, rising star. Phil Mickelson was one of the players he looked up to. Phil was generous with his time and advice. He talked to Rory about the game. He shared tips about course management, about the mental side of golf. One of the most famous pieces of advice Phil gave Rory was about Augusta National. Phil said, "One of the reasons I love Augusta National is because I feel I can be so aggressive here." Rory listened. He respected Phil. He considered him a mentor. But then things started to change. Rory started winning more. He became world number one. He surpassed Phil in the rankings. And the dynamic shifted. The mentor was no longer the top dog. The student had become the master. When LIV came along in 2022, it exposed the fault lines in their relationship. Phil joined the breakaway league. Rory stayed with the PGA Tour. And suddenly, they were on opposite sides of the biggest conflict in golf history. Rory didn't hold back. He called the defectors egotistical and selfish. He said they were fracturing the game. He said LIV was never a good thing for golf. The personal attacks started coming. In 2023, Rory made a joke about Phil's alleged gambling habits, including an allegation that Phil had tried to bet $400,000 on the Ryder Cup. Then came August 2023. Rory was caught on camera shouting, "You," in response to a question about Phil. The video went viral. In April 2026, Rory won his second Masters. Phil sent him a congratulatory message. It seemed like maybe the feud was cooling down. But then June 2026 happened. Phil's membership was revoked. The allegations surfaced. Phil's reputation crumbled. And on August 19, 2026, Rory delivered the knockout punch. He accused Phil of blowing up professional golf. He said Phil should have had a conversation instead of destroying the sport. He said Phil was the reason golf was in chaos. It was the culmination of years of frustration. Years of watching the sport he loved being torn apart by the man who was once his mentor. So what does all of this actually mean? For Phil, for Rory, and for the game itself? Let's start with Phil Mickelson. At 56 years old, he is facing the complete destruction of everything he built. His professional reputation is in shambles. He is remembered as the man who blew up professional golf, the man who led the exodus to LIV, the man who put his own ego above the good of the sport. His personal reputation is even worse. The allegations against him are serious and damaging. His membership at the Farms Golf Club was revoked. His name is now associated with misconduct, with inappropriate behavior, with a pattern of entitlement that spanned years. He has stepped away from the sport. He is dealing with a family health matter. The result is the same. Phil Mickelson is absent from the game at the exact moment his legacy is being defined. At 56, Phil Mickelson is a cautionary tale, a warning about what happens when ego trumps everything else, a reminder that legacy is fragile, and that one bad decision can undo a lifetime of good ones. Now let's talk about Rory McIlroy. Rory is the hero of this story, the voice of reason, the defender of the PGA Tour, the man who stood up to the Saudis, and he has been proven right. LIV is collapsing. The players who left are facing uncertain futures. The Saudis are cutting funding. The bubble is bursting. And Rory's criticism is now being validated by the facts. Rory has positioned himself as the conscience of professional golf. He is not just a great player, he is a leader. He is the guy who speaks his mind and stands his ground. He is the guy who refuses to compromise his principles for money or convenience. And then there is LIV Golf itself. The league that promised to revolutionize the sport is on life support. Funding is cut. Events are canceled. Players are leaving. The Saudi experiment is turning out to be a failed experiment. LIV was built on a simple premise. Throw enough money at the problem, and it will go away. But money couldn't fix the fundamental flaws in the league's model. The Saudis eventually realized they were burning through billions of dollars for very little return. The critics of LIV, and Rory McIlroy was the loudest of them, said from the beginning that the league was not sustainable. And they were right. Finally, there is the PGA Tour, the tour that Phil Mickelson tried to destroy, the tour that Rory McIlroy has defended at every turn, the tour that is now in a position of strength. But one question still hangs over all of this, and nobody has answered it yet. What happens next? Phil Mickelson is at a crossroads. He can try to rebuild his reputation. He can apologize for his decisions. He can admit that he made mistakes. But the window for redemption is closing. At 56, he does not have much time left. Will he respond to Rory's accusation? Will he accept the consequences of his actions? Or will he continue to deny everything, to blame everyone else, to refuse to take responsibility for the mess he created? Rory McIlroy is at a different crossroads. He has won the battle. He has been proven right. But the war is not over. The PGA Tour still has challenges ahead. The Saudi money is still in the game. The future of golf is still uncertain. Will Rory's stance ever soften? Will he ever be able to forgive the players who left for LIV? Will he ever be able to look at Phil Mickelson and see anything other than the man who blew up the sport he loves? The future of LIV Golf is even more uncertain. Will the league survive? Will it find new investors? Will it scale back to a smaller, more sustainable operation? Or will it collapse entirely, leaving its players stranded? These questions have no easy answers. The future of professional golf is being written right now, and every day, new developments emerge that change the story. One thing is certain. The feud between Phil Mickelson and Rory McIlroy is not over. It may never be over. It is a conflict that defines the era. It is a conflict that has changed the sport forever. Phil Mickelson at 56 is facing the fight of his life, not on the golf course, but in the court of public opinion. His legacy is being rewritten, his reputation is being dismantled, and the man delivering the blows is the same man who once looked up to him. Rory McIlroy is the hero of this story, the man who spoke truth to power, the man who refused to compromise, the man who stood up for what he believed in. And he has been vindicated. But the story is not over. There will be new chapters, new twists, new surprises. That is the nature of golf. That is the nature of life. The golf world is watching, waiting, wondering what happens next, and the only thing we know for sure is that the chaos is not over. It is just beginning. Personally, I think this feud is far from over. Do you think Phil will ever respond to Rory's accusations, or has he already lost this battle? Tell me below. And if you want to stay ahead of every twist in this story, you are in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.